Hi, I'm Alex Popov, a student of Learning Alias, and this is video 9 of the motorcycle tank tutorials. In the last video we quickly sketched in these surfaces, aligned them to the top surfaces, but we'll probably end up rebuilding them. At the moment we're just going to use them as reference so that we can build off them our construction curves for the lower set of surfaces. In the early stages of this video we'll be simply repeating the steps that we did in the previous video, building our construction curves and then building square surfaces from those curves. Then in the latter stages we'll be direct modelling the surfaces to ensure G2 continuity at all surface boundaries. And we can use the smaller set of surfaces as guides to position our construction curves. So edit point curve, snap to using Control Alt and snap to the surface edge. Then with the right mouse button, click below it so that we know that the curve is constrained to the Z axis and therefore perfectly vertical. We can now rotate this curve, referencing the shoulder surfaces as well. So there, about there. As I say, it's quite rough, this part of the build. And change the degree to 3, we don't need 5. And there we go. At this point I'll change the degree of these construction curves to degree 5. I need a little bit more control over them when I come to rebuild our smaller blend surfaces. And you can see this curve's gone a bit faulty. So just quickly, for sanity, I will change the degree of the surfaces to degree 5 and make sure they don't go faulty as well. And they don't, that's good. We can now delete them, these surfaces, as I've used them as reference to put in that first lower construction curve. Just delete the faulty curve and duplicate the end one and reposition it. And on to repeating the workflow we picked up in the previous tutorial video. Duplicate the curves by copying and pasting them, set their pivots, and then rotate along our helper curves. And same again, duplicate, set the pivot and move. Then stretch into position or scale and stretch. I'm now going to align these curves to the square surface and also our construction curves. This is so that they hold position and also G2 continuity when we move the parent curves. Moving the parent curves will give us a nicer CV layout along the aligned curves. So this one, just move, and the same with these ones, move those out. Now with Transform CV tool selected, select Hull Transform, and move this curve out in the Y direction and back in the X direction so it aligns with our help curve. We can now use the Align tool to slide the CVs into position. We'll actually scale our helper curves so that we can use them more accurately. I'll just quickly move this CV into position, snapping it in line with the NCV and just pulling it out before moving on to the curve set above this one. The reason we do this one first is it more accurately represents the work we've already done on the curves above, and we know we're happy with them. Transform CV tool to position our CVs and drive the comb into a nice smooth shape. Don't forget to align your curve, and we'll also put the comb on for this top set so that we can compare and make sure they're similar. Okay. Don't forget to use the stretch tool to make sure that the parent curve is snapped to the horizontal line using Control Alt, and then the aligned curve will follow because it's aligned and has history. And then again, now we can just do the lower curve set, sliding them, pulling in NUV direction to get the comb that we're after. When we're happy with the combs, we can stretch this final curve into position using Control Alt and then snapping to the green curve. And we can turn the controls off and build our square surfaces. So degree 5 by degree 5 surface. And again, but this time we want
curvature along boundary 4, and same with this surface. Okay, we've got a position failed, but for now it's not a problem. Let's just change the U degree to 3 so it matches the curve for the construction curves. And again, degree 5 by degree 5.
There we go, and I've got 3 boundaries along all edges for now. We'll align them later. And these 2 surfaces you want curvature along boundary 4. Okay, query edit the surfaces so we can change them to degree 5. And now we can align the surfaces along these boundaries. And you can delete the surface history when prompted. We're still having issues on those lower boundaries, so let's delete the surface history for all of our surfaces and try realigning, see if it helps. Yep. And in this instance, no. When I get a spike like this in the comb and a deviation of 1, I'll delete the surface and try rebuilding it using the square tool and change that to curvature. Still failing. So if we up the degree and obtain curvature along that bottom edge, we probably need to split the surface up because it's doing too much work. To do that, we'll use the extend tool with merge off and extrapolate selected. Hit the surface edge and extend backwards about halfway. Now with merge on, do the same. Make sure to select the larger surface, delete the history, and you snap to this surface edge using Control Alt and click. Delete those locators, and we realign these surfaces. You want to use partial option when you're aligning. If you still have a problem, up the degree, maximum degree 6, and that seemed to solve the issue, and then do the same on the top edges. Check for curvature along these boundaries, and everything looks good, so we can delete the locators, hide the helper curves or delete them, and also hide the controls on the surfaces. So there we are. Delete the history on those surfaces. They're ready to be intersected with the rest of our tank. And hide the surfaces that you don't need, just make them invisible. We can now use the intersect tool to put curves on surfaces where we want to trim. So select the first lot of surfaces, hit spacebar, and then the intersecting surfaces. Just click them once and you'll see the curves on surface. We can now start to trim. You can see we have a gap here, so essentially the curve on surface isn't quite touching the surface edge. So we need to move that surface edge up so that it's fully intersecting with the shoulder surface. The shoulder surface is white and the cutout surfaces are blue, just for reference. So I'm going to use the extend tool with merge on and Control Alt and snap to this surface edge to bring the surfaces in line. Unfortunately this one doesn't want to work. Maybe it's got history. So I'll do it individually. Snap and snap. There you go. And this one still doesn't seem to want to align with the lower edge of the other surfaces. So we can turn the controls on and do it manually by selecting the CVs. Careful which one you select here. And the remaining CVs, and then move down and hit Control to snap to that CV. There we go, that should trim. Yep. Moving along, you can see we also have a problem with this surface, so I'll just finish trimming and hide the surfaces that we don't need. Put them on a layer. Now we can zoom in and inspect where the problem is. I suspect the curves on surface aren't touching, and they're not. So to fix this, I'll basically untrim the surfaces and rebuild the curves on surface. just the one that's the problem. I can then align that rebuilt curve to the existing curves on surface that are correct. Then we'll have a continuous curve on surface that we can trim to. Zoom in and select the surface, make sure it's the right one, and zoom out so I can show you untrim. There we go. We can use fit curve with degree set to 5 and rebuild the curve on surface. So delete the curve on surface once we've rebuilt it, then use the stretch tool to close up that gap. Control, Alt and click and drag along the surface edge will snap to the surface edge, make sure we're right at the end, and then we can align it with G2 continuity. Because our curve is so close to the surface, we can use project normal, select surfaces, select the curve and project. You can then delete the curve, no longer need it, and our curves on surface now will meet up. We can trim the surfaces. There we go. Hide the curve network and put the surfaces back on. So we just need to trim the underside surfaces now, intersect them and trim. So we have another positional problem with our curves on surface, or a gap. So let's zoom in and see what the problem is. We'll use exactly the same technique as we just did. Rebuild the curve using fit curve, set to degree 5, delete the curve on surface and realign our rebuilt curve. There we go. And project normal, delete the curve and trim the surface. Now, last thing to do is, in my control panel, select the color wheel and make sure all the surfaces are the same color. Put the symmetry back on and we can have a look at where we've got to. Everything looks okay, so we'll leave it here for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial.